Hello, people of YouTube, and welcome to day 5 of Spooktober. Now, I'd like to take this moment to remind my audience that if you know of any good ghost stories, drop them in the comments and they'll be featured in this year's Spooktober. I'm always a sucker for a good ghost story, and I'm very interested to know which ones you guys know. Without further ado, let's begin day 5 of Spooktober. Today's story is called Guest from Gibbet Island, United States, from Washington Irving. When New York was still a British colony, Ellis Island in the harbor was called Gibbet Island because pirates and mutineers would hang there in chains, their bodies left for public viewing. Directly across the water from this grisly sight was the Wild Goose Tavern in the town of Communipaw. The tavern keeper was a Dutchman, Jan Jos van der Kamp, who had gone to sea as a young man. Word had it that he became a pirate chief, and that his ill-gotten wealth allowed him to buy the tavern and decorate it lavishly. He employed a man named Pluto, also rumored to have been a pirate. No love was lost between them, but each endured the other for convenience. Vanderskamp often played host to his former companions of the sea, a crew of rowdy devils. The townsfolk thought they were smugglers, but nothing could be proved. The British authorities were often summoned to stop the goings-on at the Wild Goose, but whenever they arrived, their quarry had returned to sea, and Vanderskamp grew richer with each visit from his friends. At last, the watchful British caught 3 of the suspected smugglers ashore, with a chest of Spanish gold pieces and jewels and bolts of silk. The 3 proclaimed their innocence, swearing that Vanderskamp had given them the goods. No amount of knocking at the Wild Goose roused anyone. The door was locked, the shutters were drawn. Not a trace of Vanderskamp or Pluto could be found. With no one to defend them, and the whole town accusing them, the 3 were straightway hanged on Gibbet Island, in full sight of the tavern across the water. Several days later, a much subdued Vanderskamp returned in a small boat oared by Pluto. He acted surprised to hear about the executions. In fact, he shuddered upon glancing across at the desolate island. Afterward, what illegal business floated in and out of the Wild Goose was done secretly. Often, after sundown, Pluto would row his master out to a vessel riding the waves in the harbor, letting the darkness cloak their coming and going. One night, Vanderskamp and Pluto were returning from such a visit. A distant rumble of thunder hinted at a gathering storm. "Row faster, you good-for-nothing," the tavern keeper bellowed, striking his man. He was in a foul mood, having taken a drop too much brandy on board, and having decided that the ship's captain had cheated him in their dealing. Angry at this abuse, Pluto changed course so that the boat skirted on the rocky shores of Gibbet Island. Vanderskamp, who had dozed off, was awakened by creaking overhead. Lifting his head, he found himself looking at the bodies of his 3 former companions dangling on the gallows, their chains creaking and grinding as they slowly swung backward and forward in the wind. "What do you mean pulling so close to the island, you blockhead?" cried Vanderskamp. The other man grinned unpleasantly. "I should think you'd be glad to see your old mates once more. You're never afraid of a living man. Why be afraid of the dead?" Who's afraid? Blustered Vanderskamp. I'd be glad to see my old friends, alive or dead, at the tavern any time. He fished a bottle from under his cloak and waved it at the remains of his old partners. Here's fair weather to you in the other world, and if you should visit this one again, I'd be happy to have you drop in for supper. The rising wind shook and twisted the leathery flesh and bones, so that a sound like laughter seemed to come from them. Mind the storm! Yelled Vanderskamp. Pluto rowed straight for home, but the storm caught them while they were still at sea. Rain fell in torrents, thunder crashed and pealed, and lightning blazed. It was midnight before they landed at Communipaw, dripping and shivering. As he entered the Wild Goose, Vanderskamp was startled to hear the sounds of revelry from the big room overhead. Tired and muddled by his adventures that night, the tavern keeper turned to Pluto. Why didn't you tell me we had guests tonight? No one was due, grumbled Pluto. The storm must have stranded some travelers. Well, I'll see to them. Maybe join them for a spot of ale to take the chill off me, Vanderskamp said. Somewhat unsteadily, he climbed the steps, but when he threw open the door, there at the table, on which burned a light as blue as brimstone, sat the 3 corpses from Gibbet Island. They still had their chains around their necks, and they clanked their cups together, singing, "Oh, 3 merry lads are we, come home from over the sea, first on the sand, and then on land, and last on the gallows tree." They suddenly broke off their song and turned their empty eye sockets toward Vanderskamp and beckoned him to join them. When he remained frozen in place, they rose and started toward him. Backing away in terror, Vanderskamp threw himself out the door, bellowing for Pluto. But he missed his footing on the landing place and tumbled all the way down the stairs. Days later, a search was made of the house, but it was found deserted. The drawers and chests had been emptied of anything valuable. There was talk that Pluto had killed his master, hidden his body, then robbed the house, escaping into sea. But Vanderskamp's boat was later found adrift, keel up, as if swamped by a wave. Shortly afterward, some fishermen spotted the body of the tavern keeper wedged among the rocks of Gibbet Island, just below the pirates' gallows. How Vanderskamp met his dead remained a mystery. The only witnesses were the 3 grinning skeletons in their chains, and what they knew, they told no living soul. I hope you enjoyed this story, and I will see you tomorrow for day 6 of Spooktober.